More Idaho Matters now from the studios of Boise State Public Radio News. I'm Gemma Gaudette. Almost 2 years ago to the day, the University of Idaho announced it would be acquiring the University of Phoenix, which sent shockwaves through our state's political and educational circles. Well, now, with the state-mandated deadline to close the deal, how close is this acquisition from actually happening? Kevin Richard is the senior reporter and blogger with Idaho Education News. He has been following this story from the beginning, and he is back with us with an update. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Gemma.
So, Kevin, can we have a little bit of a history lesson here? Take us back to May 17th, 2023, when that announcement was made. And as I mentioned, it was surprising for a lot of folks.
Very surprising and very abrupt. Yes, and it has been almost 2 years. The announcement came basically the day before the State Board of Education voted to give this purchase the green light. And it came through a news release and a notice of a state board meeting. And I think kind of the collective reaction was, wait, what? We're talking about acquiring the University of Phoenix, which, for those of you who are new to this whole story, is a huge for-profit online university. I mean, this is 85,000 students nationwide. I mean, it's much, much larger than the University of Idaho. It's larger than the Idaho higher education system in total. So this huge acquisition kind of came from out of nowhere 2 years ago. Now, the State Board and the University of Idaho and folks with the University of Phoenix have been talking behind the scenes for several months before this announcement and before the State Board gave the proposal of the green light. But a lot's happened in the past 2 years.
So, Kevin, what was the University of Idaho's president's reasoning for this acquisition?
The reasoning has never really changed all that much. Scott Green, president of the University of Idaho, has contended that acquiring the University of Phoenix would allow Idaho to help diversify its own portfolio as a university. He argued that this would be a revenue source for the University of Idaho, that Phoenix is a profitable enterprise, and that those profits, those revenues, would become a revenue stream for the University of Idaho. Also, Green has always argued that this is a way that the University of Idaho could help reach out to adult students, students in rural parts of the state who can't really go to a campus to learn. That's been the rationale really from the beginning, but a lot of pushback since then, a lot of pushback over these past 2 years.
So, in fact, pushback to the point of a lawsuit, Kevin, right? As you mentioned, these closed-door meetings. So the Attorney General filed a lawsuit against the University of Idaho. I know it was ultimately rejected by a judge, but that really kind of slowed the process down, it seemed.
It certainly slowed it down. Let's remember that the lawsuit itself was not per se about the purchase, but it was definitely about the process. Attorney General Raul Labrador sued the State Board of Education, arguing that the State Board's closed-door meetings about a Phoenix purchase violated open meetings law. Now, that lawsuit, you're right, it definitely slowed down this process. It definitely slowed down the University of Idaho's process of trying to finance a deal. And we're talking about a $685 million transaction. So slowing down the financing essentially slowed down the entire purchase, the entire process. The lawsuit is not dead, however. District judge had sided with the State Board. This goes back to January of 2024. The state Supreme Court has kicked that case back to district court. The Supreme Court sided with Labrador and said that there were flaws in the district court's original decision. So it is back in district court. It hasn't moved very much in district court. I believe there's a hearing scheduled for late June. Ironically, that is after the State Board's deadline to acquire the University of Phoenix. So we could be still talking about the open meetings aspect of this whole story, even after we may have some closure on the whole process of a purchase.
So, Kevin, there was a lot of movement and discussion of this purchase during the 2024 legislative session. That's in stark contrast to this session that just wrapped up. So talk to us about that and what that could mean for this June 10th deadline.
I think what it illustrates, Gemma, is that this potential purchase is facing very uncertain prospects because you're absolutely right. In 2024, the Phoenix purchase was one of the biggest issues of the legislative session, certainly in the education space.
Mhm.
And the legislature pushed back. You talked about how this deal caught a lot of people by surprise. It certainly caught legislators by surprise, and they were not happy about that. So the 2024 legislature really slammed the brakes on this purchase. Now, in between 2024 session and this past legislative session, the State Board of Education gave the University of Idaho an extension, gave them more time to work on a potential deal with Phoenix. But that was always kind of contingent on the idea that the University of Idaho would come back to the legislature this year in 2025 with some sort of a revised plan to acquire Phoenix. That never happened. The University of Idaho never really presented a plan B. So the 2025 legislative session came and went with very little discussion of the University of Phoenix, which sort of signals perhaps that there isn't a whole lot going on right now in terms of a
Mhm.
potential purchase of Phoenix. Now, U of I has never given up on the prospect. Phoenix has never publicly said that they're ruled out a, a partnership with U of I. Nobody has, raised the white flag, but really not very much went on in terms of discussion of Phoenix during this past legislative session.
Well, and Kevin, my understanding is when the state board gave this extension, didn't that kind of open the door for University of Phoenix to talk to other would-be buyers?
Yeah, and that is it, that's a big part of the story right now. We don't know if Phoenix is talking to other buyers. So they're a private institution, so any kind of conversations that they're having would certainly be going on behind the scenes. There have been reports. Bloomberg reported, I think, back in March, that Phoenix was looking at the possibility of going public, doing an IPO,
Mm.
allowing investors to purchase a share of Phoenix. That has always been one of the options that was on the table when the state board granted that extension and basically allowed Phoenix to look at other options. It took Phoenix out of the silo where they were talking exclusively to U of I. They could be talking to other entities. They could be talking to multiple other entities for all we know. And like I said, there's been a published report that suggests that they're at least looking at the idea of going public and doing this themselves through an IPO, which would have some significant financial implications for U of I.
Can you talk a little bit about that, Kevin? Because I mean, when you talk about this potentially becoming an IPO, we're talking the reporting is saying as early as the third quarter of 2025. So
Right.
that's
Right.
coming up quickly.
That's coming up quickly. I mean, the June 10th state board deadline is coming up, and then the third quarter of 2025 is right on the heels of that. So here's why it matters to U of I. Part of that deal, part of that extension that we talked about that the state
Hmm.
board approved back in June of 2024, it provided U of I with $5 million immediately from Phoenix. And what that was money that was designed to help offset some of the expenses that that U of I has incurred in reviewing, doing due diligence over a possible Phoenix purchase. We've reported that U of I has spent at least $14 million on consultants,
Hmm.
on review, on due diligence. A lot of that went to Scott Green's former employer, the Hogan Lovells law firm, where he worked before he became president of the university. So $14 million we know at the very least U of I has spent. They got $5 million back from Phoenix last summer. If Phoenix goes to another buyer, or if Phoenix goes and pursues an IPO, U of I would receive an additional $15 million, and we've called those breakup fees because basically that's what it
Hmm.
is. It would be Phoenix saying, well, we're not going to go into a partnership with U of I, but we want to provide you some money, which would, Scott Green has said this would cover the U of I's out-of-pocket expenses for due diligence. So U of I actually really has something on the line even if the partnership doesn't come to pass, they do have a
Mhm.
financial stake in what happens next with the Phoenix.
So, Kevin, I have about a minute left. If you're a betting man, what's going to happen come June 10th? I mean, and at the same time, we should note, I don't think any of us had it on our bingo card of what happened on May 17th of 23 either.
Yeah, good point. I mean, we were shocked 2 years ago. It's never out of the realm of possibility to be shocked again. Right now, all of the signals suggest to me that a U of I Phoenix partnership is probably not going to happen. But we'll,
Mm.
we'll be watching, and we've got June 10th circled on the calendar to see what happens on that date.
I have a feeling, Kevin, it's marked in big red circle, June 10th on your calendar.
Yeah, yeah, it's on my phone. I think I've got multiple reminders. We will we will have some sort of a story, I'm sure, on June 10th.
I'm sure you will. Well, as always, Kevin, we really appreciate your in depth reporting on this. Kevin Richard has been following this story literally from the beginning. He is the senior reporter and blogger with Idaho Education News. They have a whole timeline on their website, actually, of everything that has happened since this announcement was made 2 years ago. So head to Idaho Ed News for more information on this and all of the reporting that's been going on. You've been listening to Idaho Matters from Boise State Public Radio. I'm Gemma Gaudette.